Beneath the skies of Beijing, boots struck pavement in perfect rhythm. Tanks rumbled forward, missiles shimmered under stadium lights, and on a raised platform stood three men, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-Un. This wasn't just a parade. It was a declaration. China marked the 80th anniversary of World War II's end, but the choreography told a different story, not one of memory, but of momentum. Putin defying global sanctions, Xi building a digital empire, Kim emerging from diplomatic shadows, three leaders once distant, now moving in unison, not with words, but with presence, not with treaties, but with tanks. Together they sent a message to the world. The global balance of power is shifting. As their silhouettes stood framed by a sea of soldiers, the question became unavoidable. Is this the formation of a new global alliance, or the rehearsal for a darker future? This was not just a display of strength. This was a statement. On September 2nd, 2025, Beijing was transformed. The city's streets filled with cheering citizens, military columns, and global cameras. China's commemoration of World War II's end doubled as a demonstration of modern power. Xi Jinping stood center stage, calm and immovable. To his left, Vladimir Putin. To his right, Kim Jong-Un. Their presence reframed the occasion. What could have been a historical tribute became a political theater. All three nations face Western sanctions. All three are branded as disruptors of the global order. And now they stood together, not isolated, but united. As the military hardware rolled through the capital, it was clear. This wasn't just about legacy. It was about leverage. The missiles weren't reminders of past wars. They were signals of future readiness. The cheers were not only patriotic, they were carefully directed. Every movement was meant to convey strength, discipline, and mutual alignment. There were no joint speeches, no formal pacts, but the symbolism was sharper than any communique. This was China saying, "We haven't forgotten history, but we're ready to shape what comes next." For the West, the parade looked like a flex. For the East, it was a milestone. And in the silence between salutes, the unspoken message hung heavy. When these nations stop competing and start cooperating, the geopolitical map begins to shift. It began not with a jet, but a train. An armored green locomotive slicing through the hills of North Korea, carrying one man, Kim Jong-Un. After years of absence from global diplomacy, the supreme leader was headed to Beijing, not to negotiate, not to plead, but to be honored. This wasn't a routine visit. It was historic. Kim had not traveled to China since 2019. His previous headline moments were with Donald Trump in Singapore and Hanoi, events that made global headlines but led to dead ends. Now he chose a different track, aligning himself more firmly with Beijing and Moscow. Kim arrived to a red carpet welcome. He reviewed troops, exchanged pleasantries with Xi, and took a front-row seat beside Putin during the parade. North Korea wants sanctions relief, military cooperation, and legitimacy. Russia and China see opportunity, a partner unconstrained by Western norms, willing to disrupt where others hesitate. Reports point to potential arms deals, satellite sharing, and joint cyber capabilities. Three nations, each boxed in by the West, now choosing convergence over isolation. Kim didn't make speeches. He didn't need to. His presence alone said enough. He came by train, a relic of Cold War diplomacy. But the message he delivered moved faster than any locomotive. North Korea is not alone, and it's choosing its place in the East. Russia and China have walked parallel paths for decades, one fueled by raw power, the other by strategic patience. But now, those paths are intersecting. Putin and Xi, once cautious collaborators, have grown into full-scale partners. Their alliance is not based on ideology, but on utility. Each sees in the other what the West has denied them: legitimacy, leverage, and a shared disdain for American hegemony. Their economic ties have deepened. Pipelines stretch from Siberia to Shanghai. Trade flows in record volumes. Military exercises are increasingly joint, and their narratives are in sync. Russia challenges the West with military defiance, most visibly in Ukraine. China does it through infrastructure, diplomacy, and global finance. Both, however, aim for the same goal: to restructure the world order on their terms. Putin, under sanctions, has leaned hard into Chinese support. Xi, wary of Western pushback, has chosen strategic ambiguity but never condemnation. Their shared vision was visible at the parade, no words exchanged publicly, but every gesture reflected unity. They stood not as allies in a treaty, but as twin poles of a rising axis. Behind the pageantry lies a calculated chessboard. Russia sees China as its economic lifeline. China sees Russia as its geopolitical distraction, absorbing Western attention while it builds quietly. The West sees danger. But in Beijing and Moscow, this is seen as destiny. They are not reviving an old Cold War alliance. They're engineering a new one, less ideological, more opportunistic, bound not by belief, but by resistance. And in a world that's becoming increasingly transactional, that may be enough. While Beijing showcased its military pageant, one key player kept its distance: India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the SCO summit in Tianjin, meeting with both Xi and Putin. But when the Beijing parade began, India was absent. This wasn't a snub, it was strategy. India shares deep ties with Russia. It maintains growing trade with China, and yet it stands as a key partner of the West, economically and militarily. Border disputes with China remain tense. The scars of Ladakh and Doklam are still fresh. India seeks balance, not alignment. It participates in BRICS, yet strengthens ties with the U.S., France, and Israel. It buys oil from Russia while signing defense deals with the West. It calls for multipolarity, yet guards its sovereignty fiercely. Modi's absence in Beijing was deliberate. India is not ready to be part of a bloc. It wants to shape the table, not be seated by others. This measured neutrality has made India unpredictable and powerful. It doesn't echo the West's condemnation, nor does it cheer the East's aggression. It watches, weighs, and moves on its own terms. In a world asking, "Whose side are you on?" India's answer remains consistent: its own. Xi Jinping's vision for the world is not just about Chinese dominance, it's about ending Western dominance. At both the SCO and BRICS summits, he outlined an alternative global structure, one without dollar dependency, one without NATO interference, one where power is decentralized and no longer dictated by the West. Together with Russia and an expanding BRICS Plus bloc, China is promoting digital currency trials, reserve currency frameworks, and trade routes that bypass the U.S. dollar. But ambition comes with risks. This multipolar order is not necessarily more stable. It includes regimes with vastly different values, and often with no shared commitment to human rights or global cooperation. Without accountability, power can fracture or coerce. Russia's war in Ukraine continues. North Korea tests missiles. China flexes over Taiwan. Is this the birth of a new balanced world, or the rise of a fragmented, volatile one? As the West rushes to defend its order, the East is building a new one in parallel, not with treaties, but with transactions. The world is not moving toward peace, it's moving toward competition. And in that race, clarity is rare, but consequences are certain. He wasn't in Beijing, but his influence lingered like a shadow: Donald Trump. During his presidency, Trump dismantled long-standing alliances, challenged NATO, and flirted with authoritarian leaders. He met Kim Jong-Un. He praised Putin. He launched a trade war with China. And in doing so, he weakened the foundations of the Western-led order. Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang took notice. Now, with Trump eyeing a return in 2025, speculation has returned. Would he abandon NATO altogether? Would he lift sanctions on Russia? Would he turn isolationist again and leave a vacuum others are eager to fill? At the Beijing parade, the silence said it all. There were no direct mentions of the U.S., no criticism of Trump, but everything was designed to speak to that legacy, to what happens when American leadership retreats. For the East, Trump's unpredictability was a gift. For the West, it was a fracture. Now, as elections loom, the world waits. Sometimes the most powerful figure in the room is the one who isn't there. The Beijing parade was more than a military display. It was a media event, executed with precision. Every frame was curated, every camera angle designed, every image broadcasted across continents. There were no wild speeches, no dramatic declarations, just three leaders standing tall, in silence. In that silence, they shaped the message, one of unity, one of strength, one of shared resistance. State media amplified the symbolism. International media dissected it. Social platforms echoed it, repackaged for every audience. It wasn't just national pride, it was strategic storytelling. The visuals traveled faster than any policy memo. They didn't just impress, they provoked. They planted a question into global consciousness. Are we watching the rise of a new axis? Because in today's world, propaganda doesn't always lie. Sometimes, and it just poses the right question at the right time, and the answers are left to interpretation or assumption. When diplomacy falters and conflict simmers, perception becomes power, and Beijing has mastered the image. The streets of Beijing are quiet now. The parade has passed. The leaders have returned to their capitals. But what remains is not the sound of marching. It's the echo of alignment. No official pact was signed. No war was declared. But something shifted. Three nations, long painted as outliers, walked in step. And the world took notice. Was this a flex? A distraction? Or the early choreography of a new order? In geopolitics, moments like this aren't defined immediately. Their meaning unfolds with time. But one truth is certain. When old powers walk in rhythm, the world listens, carefully, because history may not repeat, but it always rhymes. In a world where alliances shift overnight, power isn't just in weapons, it's in strategy. Stay aware, stay curious. This is Politics Unpacked, where global moves meet sharp insight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories behind the headlines.